everyone. My name is Jesse Chason with Lisa Blanchard as the host of Airing Addiction.
I share often my journey started on this campus. Got sober as a client here, just like you.
I really do see phenomenal change.
Always hope. I've seen situations that on the surface look impossible become possible.
Doing this podcast is to share those recovery stories, be honest about what the challenges are and have some real conversations, but kind of share that out on the airwaves.
Welcome everybody to our second Airing Addiction episode of 2022. Still getting used to that date. We decided to do two podcasts in January. Often January is kind of a time of renewal and fresh starts for folks, but also it's a time that it can be frustrating by the end of January if we haven't taken any steps to our goals. So it's a great reminder that you can kind of start fresh and start a new path literally every day. So I'm really excited to have our guest here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Jesse, my co-host, who will introduce our guest.
Thanks, Lisa. Good morning, everyone out there in the podcast world and that will be listening to this. I'm really excited to. Our guest today is AJ. He's someone who we know here pretty well. He was here over a year ago, and we're going to get into his story in a second. Just someone who really shows the power of the program, the power of doing the right thing, and really is a powerful example. You know, I say often that if I don't hear from a client, like if I don't see a client come back here physically for treatment, my default is to think no news is good news, and they're out there and they're not needing us. That's why they're coming back, because they're doing well. And AJ is someone who is an example of that. So good morning, AJ.
Good morning, Jesse.
So we like to start off just with however much you feel comfortable sharing your story, you know, whatever part you want to start from, and just it's your story.
Thank you. And thanks for having me on this show, Jesse, Lisa, and James. So my story, I guess, is, you know, I don't get into too much of other than qualify to let people understand that, you know, where I come from and some of the struggles that I've had to overcome. You know, I started, you know, drinking and drugging at a very young age. You know, and unfortunately, addiction was in my family. You know, my father wasn't in the picture. My mother was an active addict. And, you know, while other kids on their 13th birthday were maybe getting G.I. Joes, I think I got a keg, you know, and that kind of, and just to give an idea of like where, you know, kind of where the upbringing looked like from there, you know. You know, so basically it was just nothing but chaos in my household. You know, my mother was not available. My father wasn't in the picture, like I said. And, you know, I had to fend for myself. You know, I learned how to con, manipulate, steal, do whatever I had to do to pretty much get wherever I had to go. And, you know, financial barriers, you know, for my mother and you know, my family were to the point where I didn't know whether I was going to have heat or electricity or food or anything like that. And, you know, it really put me in the position where I just learned how to live on the streets and just get by however I needed to get by, you know. And it wasn't long, obviously, before I got myself in a lot of trouble. You know, I got involved with people, I guess, that at the time, maybe I looked up to them. You know, I think that my views on life were very warped, right? And, you know, I'd never had like the father figure or somebody showing me good mannerisms or, you know, anything that is usually instilled, I think, in children, you know, from a young age. You know, I learned how to, you know, hustle and con and, you know, be dishonest and, you know, basically tell people whatever I thought they wanted to hear, you know, to like, you know, get whatever I thought I could take from a situation. Like I never went into anything like what somebody had to offer me, it was always what can I get out of this, or what I could bring to the table. I ended up getting locked up at like a young age, the DYS, and I did the whole, going through the system. I was in and out of DYS. I did my first halfway house when I was 15 years old. And like at the time I can remember like older guys in the house, and they're like, listen, kid, if you don't smarten up, like, this is what's going to happen. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I thought that I thought that like I had all the answers, and I was just like a punk kid, and of course everything they said was going to happen happened. The time got longer, the charges got worse, the losses piled up. I was definitely, I just walked around like I didn't have any regard for anybody else nor myself. And like living like that will put you in some really dark places, some bad places with some bad people. And, and like, I was completely okay with that. I really honestly believed that I wasn't going to make it till 21. I lived every day like it was the last day, and like, so every day was just like a story, and like not a good story, like a nightmare. I continued like to use, I ended up starting to use with my mother. And I say this because it's a very important part of my story, with my mother. That turned to the point where it just kept going down like unhealthy places, obviously, because it's not, a healthy thing. And, what ended up happening with that situation. So I ended up going away, and now I'm about 20 years old. I get out. I go to another halfway house. And at this time, I'm like a sponge. So I know how to soak up all the information around me so I could say all the right things, right? And I could tell everybody what I thought they wanted to hear. So it even sounded like I knew what I was talking about. But when it came to like application, I felt beyond short because I didn't even really want to do anything different than what I was doing. I just wanted to say whatever I needed to say to get out of any situation. Right. And, my mother was like, she had some other things going on, some trouble, and she left. And, I ended up graduating the halfway house I was in. And like, I really tried to like, put some time together. Like I seen that my life wasn't where I wanted it to be, in a sense that like I knew there's some things I could do differently. So I tried to get sober. When I say sober, I mean my idea of sober back then was probably the gym, unhealthy relationships, and new sneakers, and maybe like a tan. Like that was my idea of like, okay, well, I dress up the outside, and like, as we talk, like, like that was like a huge part of my story was, image and, really just dressing up the outside to validate the inside. Right. And so like, as long as like, I thought if I looked good, I felt good. Right. And, I'll speed it up to about 2009. In 2008, I met my father for the first time. I like looked him up online on one of those finding people websites, and I actually found him. And I kind of went in there as like a joke looking for him. And so I went down, I met him. He was in pretty bad shape from being in active addiction his whole life. And he passed away a year later of an overdose. And then 3 months after that, my mother overdosed and passed away. And so when it happened with my father, I was really, I didn't really know him, so it was something that, I was just like, all right, like that was tough. And at the time I had some time put together, abstinent. But when it happened with my mother, that I didn't handle well at all. And, like I think I literally found out I called her, and a sheriff answered the phone down in Florida and told me. And I went right across the street to the liquor store and like went on this vicious tear. And meanwhile, at the time, I was sober from like booze. Opiates weren't in the picture yet for me. They followed not too long after that. So like what I've come to learn is that like, when the alcohol stopped taking the pain away, I'd move to the next thing. And when that stopped taking the pain away, I'd move to the next thing, right? And like, of course, it led me to a needle. And eventually that stopped taking the pain away, and I just started overdosing. And that's a big part of my story as well. So I basically, the bottom line is that like I did the same thing over and over and over again, like consistently, just not willing to do anything different, right? Like I was that kid that if you told me, hey, if you like touch this stove and it's hot, you're gonna burn yourself, I'd probably touch it 10 different ways, just different but the same, to try to make sure that that's what it's gonna be. Like I was always like a 50-yard man in a 100-yard race. Like I always halfway did everything, but I wanted the results everybody else had, right? That was doing it the whole way. And then I was wondering why I wasn't getting the same results they were, but I wasn't doing the same things they were. You know what I mean? Like I was just unwilling to commit to anything, to like, to see like my part in my own life, so to speak, if that makes sense. So I continued to struggle with relationships. By this point, this is 2008, 2009. I've been on my own most of my life. I've been battling addiction. I didn't have any. I had my children, who I have a 17-year-old son now and a 14-year-old daughter this week. And that they are a major part of why I'm probably still alive and actually got to this point, but they were never enough, unfortunately, and it sucks to say that, to like get me to like pursue recovery 100%, and like as a man, that's just hard to admit, especially as a father. So I was like inconsistent in their lives because I wouldn't let them see me messed up. And meanwhile, like, the rest of my family is kind of passed on, either due to the disease or some other things that's happened in my life. I have some traumas that, I think my whole life has been a lot of traumas, and like, it's tough in the sense that I thought I was like that guy that could never get this, right? Because of losses in my life. I thought I was like the person that was, like hopeless. I came, like, I've recovered from hopeless state now, but I 100% was absolutely hopeless. Like, I thought if anybody had a life like I did, they would continue doing what I was doing. And there was going to be only one end result for me, and it wasn't going to be a successful, sustainable life in recovery. Right. And like I continued to like beat myself up, and like because I thought that way, I blocked myself from any other experience I could ever possibly have, and then I walked around with like this chip on my shoulder, like always being angry and like threatening and intimidating, or at least looking that way so that nobody would approach me. I was unapproachable, and it was probably a defense that I built over the years from being on the street and being in the system, but in the same sense, like it took a lot of energy to be that person all the time. That's for sure. And again, that kind of blocked me from being anybody else, and what I come to find out is like, when you act like something for so long, I turned into that person, even if it wasn't me, like that's all my mannerisms were around, like being that like tough guy, unapproachable, like I don't need help for anything, and it kept me sick for a long time, like a really long time. I ended up going in and out of the system for years. I mean, my story isn't too different from a lot of people that's been like, I had some street life, like, experience and a lot of losses. Like I just did the cycle, and that's all it is. It was like a merry-go-round. I'd go in, I'd feel better. I maybe, I was able to earn like a good living building houses. So I was able to, things would get good on the outside really fast, but inside I was the same broken person that I came in years ago. And like, come to find out, like every time that like I would relapse because it was so overwhelming of all the stuff that I had to fix, right? I would just not only prolong the inevitable, which was dealing with all this stuff, but I would just kept adding to it, right? It was like a catch-22, right? Like here I am trying to numb, all this stuff because it was just so overwhelming. I couldn't look at I'd always look at the whole picture, like, dude, how can I possibly fix all this stuff, right? Instead of just focusing on like each day and the one thing. So like, I guess basically what it comes down to is like, I was just got to the point, I think that, like my eyes opened up, you could call it getting older. You can call it like a spiritual awakening. You could call it like just getting sick and tired and being beaten into a state of willingness. Cause like, that's what I really believe it was, but everything I always have heard finally made sense to me. Like I can, all them stupid slogans, you know what I mean? Like they're all the like, keep it simple and one day at a time. And like all them things that like, I was like, yeah, all right, whatever. You know what I mean? It finally like actually did make sense, and like, I'm like, okay, like, well, just maybe. Right. So what happened was I went into a 12-step program, in Stoneham, and, like I actually put 75-80% effort in. Right. And I seen some results for the first time in many, many years where like, cause like, I did have a good result long time ago before I picked up opiates. And like, I was always chasing that. Like I've never given up. That's the one thing I could say is like, I always get back on my feet. I've always kept trying. But like after a while, if I kept half trying and failing, you start losing that ambition. You know what I mean? And like, that's a real dangerous place to be in. But I was always chasing that, and I was like, well, maybe that's gone. Well, I finally got it back then, and like life got pretty good. I didn't have any particular reason except that I was holding on to some of my bad habits, right? Whether it was, taking gabapentin, still getting my Adderall prescription and getting rid of them because like in my mind, I was like, so it's completely justifiable. I have no support from family or finances. Like I need money. Everybody else got, parents buying them stuff. And here I am, like, I need to get by too. Right. And like, so I like completely justified it. And I was like, I know that, and I knew then because there was a feeling that goes behind when you're doing something, you're not supposed to be like, you're conscious. That's like, I consider that my higher power. Right. Well, they give you that option, like, hey, you're not supposed to do that. And then there's me who's like, the hell with it, right? and that's like me doing what I want to do, and then wondering why I get the results the same every single time. That's, basically like, misery and much more that comes with that, right? But like, so for no reason at all, things were going really well in my life, and I picked up, right? My kids were back in my life. I was consistent. Not that they weren't never not in my life, but I was able to like see them and like, I've always talked to them and unless I was away or whatever, but I was consistently on very good ground with them, and I was working on my relationship with them as well as like doing some work what I thought on myself. But again, I just was really distracting myself from myself with some things, whether it was work and then like females, was like a big part, just getting involved in some unhealthy situation, right? And just to focus on anything but myself, really, So when I relapsed, of course, like in my mind, I create these like delusions, right? And like the delusion that I create is like, whatever it is my particular one that time was that I was doing everything I was supposed to be doing, right? So then I like tunnel vision on that delusion, and then I make all the puzzle pieces fit to that one idea that I have, right? But it's all a lie anyways. if that makes sense. I don't know, but like, and that's like been the story of my life, like consistently, right? Is like, I'll like tell myself something so much and like create these like these very complex delusions, right? That I'd make all the other puzzle pieces fit. And so, but that experience that I had there, basically, I came to you soon after up at New England Recovery Center. And like, I can remember like calling. So I went through a different detox and I called up to go to the residential up there specifically, because, I think I may or may not have had some behavior problems, down to the detox of prior experience. So I called and said, listen, I promise like this time's going to be different, because like I was talking about that it threatened and like intimidate and like, I didn't necessarily have to say much. The way I carried myself was just like, it was inappropriate. Right. In the sense that like I walked around like with a chip on my shoulder all the time and it made people uncomfortable. And, so I called and I talked to a couple of people that worked there and I called Mary Beth, the director at the time, and I didn't know her really well at all, but I just was calling and leaving voicemails. Hey, listen, things are going to be different. Please let me come back there. Right. And then I got up there and like, I decided at that point that I wanted to do a 12-step recovery house. Because I do know that solution has worked for so many people. Why am I going to try to like change that up? That didn't make sense to me. Right. And like the proof was in the pudding. Like I knew that it worked for a lot of people, and I knew it worked for a lot of people that's experienced, some difficult times in their lives. And, so I'll speed it up, but I went, when I was there, we had COVID. I got locked in there, and so 30 days I was doing, and like on day 28, we got locked in with COVID, and I was supposed to leave on Monday. I think it was like Saturday, and they're like, yeah, 10 days, you're locked in. And I'm like, I wasn't happy. And, I basically was like normally in the past, right, what I would do is just do whatever I wanted to do. Okay, well, you know what? See you later. I had enough of the place at 30 days. It's a tight area, but I was like doing things different. Like I was hitting my knees. I was praying. Like I was trying to do everything that I took in over the years, right? Every little thing I ever heard, I was willing to do then, because I was willing to do anything at all to not go back to the way of life that I was living, right? And I mean anything. Like it didn't matter. I just knew that, I could not go back to that way of life. I just couldn't. And honestly, like I knew, like I had like a brief moment where I knew I was worth it. Right. So I stayed, and then day number 9 of those 10, somebody else got COVID. And I'm like, and they're like, yeah, another 10 days. We're not letting anybody go, and we're shutting down admissions. So I'm like, you got to be kidding me. And, so I probably swore a little bit, and just kind of went into my little bubble, probably sitting in my room with a 5-gallon bucket doing curls and push-ups and reading books. It's probably where I was at that point. Right. And, but I tried doing stuff around the facility. Like I'd help out. I was serving food to the people. I was like, like I do whatever I need to do to stay busy and like just be active in my recovery the best way that I could be in given the circumstances I was in. Right. And tried to remain like a positive attitude. At the end of the day, I was extremely grateful, because like where I've been in my life, even what I had there, it was a blessing. You know what I mean? So I've not had a hard time remaining grateful, even to this point now. Anyway, so I ended up day number like 7 of those 10 days. It happened again. Right now, there's only like 5 people there, and they're really all not happy at all. And I think it was me and like 5 women, and they were just not having it, and I'm like, God, I hope this is coming to an end pretty soon. There's gonna be nobody left. I think there was more staff that was working than there was clients at the time. It was pretty crazy. And, but what's good is about like a small group of people. It's like, I got to know like the staff and the people that I was with there, who I still talk to a couple today, and so my plan all of a sudden changed, right? My plan didn't change in the sense I knew I wanted to go to a 12-step house. I have financial barriers. So Family Restored was working with me to like help me scholarship me to a house, and I was gonna go to Maine. Well, because of the time frame, COVID or whatever, or just God working in my life, however you want to put it, right? Like I believe that like everything happens for a reason. There's no mistake, right? I came to Michael's house in Wilmington, where I started living like in a solution-based program, right? I got involved in the 12 steps again, but this time I was willing to do things differently, right? I didn't want to be that, 50-yard guy or that 80% guy, because I knew like anything under 100% for me equals a relapse. So if I'm only 90% doing something, then I'm going to be on the streets if I'm lucky, you know what I mean? And I also know that honestly, like, the chance of me even making it back nowadays is not guaranteed, that for sure, I've used up my 9 lives a few times already. So, and I'm just unwilling now. Now I'm unwilling to give up what I have no matter what. So I'll do anything I can. And then I guess, as well as like, I got into like working in the drug and alcohol field. Because like the way I see it, like I've been a taker, I think, most of my life, right? Not necessarily like taking everything, but like now I feel like, I can spend the second half of my life giving back, and trying to help people who had that same way of thinking that I did, that they've had so much damage and so much trauma, and they're so different in the sense that like they can never get this. Like, I just want people to know that like there's hope, you know what I mean? And like it just takes really about doing something uncomfortable that you weren't willing to do before. Like it was like the most simplest things that made sense. Like I did the same thing, I got the same results, right? And that's basically what it came down to, is like I continued to do the same thing over and over and over again, right? And expect a different result. But I actually did the same thing over again and knew the results, right? Like I knew what was going to happen, right?
And you did it anyway.
I'd absolutely do it anyways, with not even like a regard, like again, for anything, I just didn't, I didn't have enough self-worth at the time, I think, which was kind of like part of the living in the grips of the disease type of thing, that, we convince ourselves that I'm not worth it. I'm not enough. I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve success. I don't deserve a happy life. I don't deserve sustainable, healthy relationships in my life. Right. And like, I convinced myself of all these things, and like, I'll say this too, like I put myself around, like I trusted untrustworthy people. I relied on like unreliable people. I had faith in unfaithful people. So there was like no wonder why I had a general consensus that everybody just sucked in life, right? But I didn't look at like my responsibility in any of that, right? The fact that like I like consistently, I think I get to a point in my life, right, where I wasn't the victim, I was the victimizer, right? So like I was responsible and accountable for my own actions, and like from that point on, I think that like I think there's some things that happened early in my life that I was, it's kind of like not no fault of my own. Some things that like played out and like got me to like where I was. But then at some point, I think that, I wasn't responsible. You know what I mean? I knew better, and I continued doing the wrong thing,
Yeah. So one of the things I'd say, and so much of your story really, I've like taken lots of notes about things that are really impactful to me, but as a clinician, one of the things that I think is helpful to help people understand is that trauma impacts your brain, and it impacts the pathways that you have, and so does addiction, right? So it's not that you don't have agency, it's just harder. right? So you learn from an early age that the world is not a necessarily supportive, helpful place, right? You grew up in a space of chaos with a lot of traumatic background. Like the information that your brain had about what the world was like was one that was, a very dark picture, right? Because that's what you were used to, right? Which then led to addiction, and then that continues to develop those pathways. And even the story you told as you learned of your mom's passing, and then your immediate response, right, was to go to the liquor store because that's what your brain told you is what I should do to manage this pain, right? Because that pathway was really clear. And it takes a while, right, to develop new brain pathways. I love what you said about kind of you heard all the things in all of the treatment episodes and going through the system. You didn't really act on any of it, but you knew what to say, but your brain heard that, right? And so I loved when you said when you were kind of ready to make some actual changes, you had a lot of knowledge in there, right? Like you were able to get through multiple, extensions of COVID at New England Recovery Center with all of the knowledge of the things that you could be doing differently, even if you hadn't really fully given it your 100% before. And so it just, I just like to kind of frame that if somebody out there is having a difficult time, like getting to that point, right? And that it's taking a long time, that might be why, right? But also see that you can get to that point, right? That recovery from both traumatic experiences and from addiction is possible.
Yeah. I agree. It's definitely, so, I mean, this is a theory of mine and I might be off, like, as far as like from a clinical standpoint, but I feel like what's really tough about somebody that does have some very significant trauma, right? I'll speak on myself because I don't know what clinical aspects there is to this, but like once I experienced like a certain level of like emotional pain, it made my bottom have to be that much lower for me to become willing, right? Because like once I experienced that certain level of pain, I had to go even lower than that to become willing to want to change. And I might be off with that, but like that was my experience. I don't know that there's something like behind that. Because I always wondered why, I consistently just kept banging my head off of a wall, like more like
AJ, that makes perfect sense to me from a recovery standpoint, at least. You hear in the halls that your bottom's when you stop digging. And, why does someone quote unquote get it when someone else doesn't? And that's what makes recovery so personal and individual. And yeah, there's probably something there. Lisa can speak to it more than I about clinically, the trauma impact in our brains as a young child growing up and correlates to, later on in life when we're trying to recover. But, I heard so much, and I know your story too. And it was just amazing to hear yet again on here, from the chaos of early life that led to dishonest behaviors and then going through the system. And I heard you talk about it was a cycle, round and around we go, and you were able to identify, you were literally repeating the same behaviors again, knowing the result, but doing it anyway because you didn't care about the outcomes and consequences. And then I heard you say a couple really impactful things that I know are going to help a lot of people listening to this. You said things would get good on the outside fast, right? I even joked around like, gym, sneakers, tan, just dress up the outside, right? But inside you are still a person. And until we address that brokenness, we can dress up the outside all we want, but it's only a temporary fix to a permanent problem. We need a permanent solution to a temporary problem. So another thing you said was you never gave up, even banging your head, like you said so many times. Mm-hmm. You never gave up. You always kept trying, and that's just so huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing that jumped out at me too is you were kind of, one of the things you said, I don't know if this is a direct quote, right? But you were unable to see your part in your own life. I really loved that quote. Like most podcasts, like something kind of, sticks out to me that I'm going to keep. And I really liked the way that you worded that because I think it's so real, right? Like, and especially in the context of having a traumatic background, right? And, you learned really early on that the world isn't always a kind place, right? And that there's not going to necessarily be somebody there to catch you when you fall, and that you didn't have a lot of agency, right? at different points in your life. And so you had to really learn and relearn and reteach your brain, right? That you had agency, right? That you had the ability to impact the direction of your life, impact your circumstances, and it takes a long time to relearn those things, right? And to understand them, because that wasn't part of what your brain was told for a long time. And maybe a lot to do with why it takes multiple steps, right? And it takes multiple attempts, that you had to kind of learn for yourself that if I actually give that 100%, right? Not the 50%, not even the 75%, right? That you actually can change the direction of what happens next.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely didn't take any less than 100+% from myself. So what I came to learn was that, all the behaviors and the mannerisms and everything that got me up to life, up until the point where I decided to make some changes, completely worked against me, right? Like the way my whole way of thinking that was so warped, that was fit into the lifestyle that I lived, completely worked against me when I tried to come into the halls, right? Some of the principles, for one, the big thing for me was a really big thing was the medication, like I talked about, right? Always having that little side hustle, always having that that ace and I thought in my back pocket, and stuff like that, where I would 90% do something, but was unwilling to 100% do something. And then I was wondering why, right? Why I kept getting the same results, becoming willing to do absolutely anything, right? To give up all them bad behaviors and give up and live an honest life no matter what. So I can sit here and tell you that I live an honest life in all my affairs, right? And I could say that on the air. I could say that to anybody because it's the truth, right? And anybody that knows me can tell you that. That wasn't the story with me always at all. There was always, like I said before, usually some hidden agenda or motive to anything I did at all, right? But making them changes like that where I could finally reach a state of peace of mind, because at the end of the day, that's what I've achieved out of doing what I do, and why I continue doing what I do is I've reached a state of peace of mind. And of course, what comes with that is a lot of good things. I got good people in my life. I have some lifelong friends that I've met through the process. It's so worth the work and the changes that seemed the changes that were I had to stay vigilant constantly of, they've kind of slowed to the point where I don't have to, worry about them as much, right? So just bad behavior, you make bad habits, you could just as easy turn around and make good behavior and good habits. And by consistently doing the right thing and putting the, my best foot forward, so to speak. Right. And obviously, we falter, I'm a human being. Nobody does this perfectly. And when I hear somebody say they do, I probably stay away from them. Right. But I do make corrective actions when necessary. I do inventory. I do, I help others. I do whatever I'm told or have been told, or I see working with people that have longevity and sobriety, right? And then there's a lot of good things, obviously, that come from that. Like I said, I'm able to have meaningful relationships in my life. I'm able to be available to my children and to help people. I mean, it's
you talked about, AJ, are probably trustworthy today rather than trusting untrustworthy people. Those long, right, lifelong friends now you can rely on because kind of like the proof's in the pudding. You've seen it already.
Yeah. Well, without a doubt, I can call some of the guys that I've met anytime, any moment, any day. If I need something, they'll be available, right? As would I if they called me. And that's another thing I learned, that relationships with men or females are two-way things, not one way, not me just taking. I could actually be available to give back. It's kind of crazy how that works,
Who knew, huh? Who knew?
The other thing is that the other analogy you gave that I really liked, right? And, is that you were trying to like kind of make this puzzle fit, right? And anybody that, throughout the pandemic or other times kind of got into puzzling, it became a thing for a while for a lot of people, right? Have all been in that position where there's like a couple of pieces left and you just kind of try to make them fit instead of taking apart the section that is probably wrong. And when you talk about, how you were doing kind of most of the things, but you kind of had the side hustle, you kind of had that other, activity that really wasn't fitting, right? And you would try to make it fit instead of dismantling it a bit, right? And then putting it together kind of the right way. I loved that analogy. I think that really kind of, jokingly fits for a lot of people.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Like, I guess that's been like such a, making pieces fit to like suit my needs type of deal, right? It's been like the story of my life, right? Like the way that things could possibly be okay that I was doing was if I convinced myself in my head that they were, regardless of like the reality of the situation, if that makes sense. And then, I hate to say that, like, because I don't believe that I never had any regard. I believe I convinced myself that too, right? Because I come to find out I actually care a lot about people, you know what I mean? Which, like, had you known me for most of my life, you would probably not. It just wouldn't make sense, right?
That was
like who I was.
That was the armor you had to put on yourself.
Yeah, I was like armor with Kevlar with concrete mixed with steel. It was insane. But again, like that blocked me from having anything else but to be that person all the time, right? And quite honestly, like, when I finally just said, you know what, like I'm done with that, it was such a relief and a weight off my shoulders. Like I don't have to be that guy anymore. Like I really don't care. Like, what are people going to say? Like, hey, look at this kid. Wow, he's straightening out his life. Like, what an ass. I mean, come on. Like, it just, but like, that's the reality of the situation is like, the people that would be judging me, they're really insignificant. Right.
What do they say, AJ? The people that matter don't judge and the people that judge don't matter.
Yeah.
That's right.
Similar, right? Like
that's right.
Those who mind don't matter and those who matter don't mind.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I'm really big on sayings today.
Yeah. We get a few of them already in this podcast. You said so much, AJ, and like I said, I knew you while you were here. I got to see sort of that, like when you were talking about the Kevlar and the concrete, and I just had this like image in my mind of like, like in the comic books where like someone made a rock just like, the cracks start and then, they become this new person and now you're this new person, right? And you're doing things differently and you're getting different results, right? So if you want to talk a little bit about what you are doing now, I think people would benefit from hearing that.
Yeah, so I am the director over at Michael's house and Patrick's house, and they are both 12-step solution-based houses. And that's like a huge. The houses gave me the opportunity, right, to find like the sustainability, because like when you go into a house where everybody is doing like-minded what you're doing are trying to do, like everybody's there for the same reason, it makes it a lot easier to keep pursuing that, if that makes sense, right? So like the 12 steps for me has been the solution, with a little therapy, of course, because I needed it. But the 12 steps have definitely been my solution. So I work with the houses, and everything that entails is bringing guys through the book, one through up to guys making their amends, doing 10-step inventory, running an inventory workshop over here at the houses. We do daily reflections. We do other house meetings, alumni speaking. We also go on commitments when they're available. Obviously we did talk a little about COVID and what a nightmare it's been like for a disruption in the world and like in the AA community and addiction, just like, just in general, definitely change for anybody that's dramatic is never like necessarily a good thing. The guys handling it pretty well. We just got to kind of like go with like the times right now. It's unfortunate, but things have been a little quiet on the home front with doing commitments and stuff just because of the COVID and stuff. I'm also working part-time doing admissions for another rehabilitation program. I say part-time, it's probably 30, 35 hours a week. So like, I've been busy, I try to stay busy with, and at the same time, obviously, like we talked about balance in the beginning and I joked around about it a little bit, right? But like, I make sure that like I do make some me time because it is important, right? Just like any other thing. Like, so now I don't obsess about drugs and alcohol. I'm definitely recovered from a hopeless state of mind, but then there's other things that come up in life. You know what I mean? Like I have to keep up front my character defects and like what I'm doing currently. And like, yeah, I could focus 100% on going to work, but like, I got to be careful on old behaviors, right? Am I doing this to like, am I keeping what's up front the most important thing, right? And like, so I have to like make sure that I can consistent doing my own inventory and taking care of myself as well as being available for the guys in the house. And, I love working with the guys. I really do. I like to, and I like to see people come into the house and like go through the process, right? And like come from like this broken place to like getting their family back, getting their wives back, getting their careers back. And then like I stay in touch with everybody that comes through and leaves. And I'm like, I'm available for guys that come through, leave, and then slip up, I'm always available, but yeah, the houses are a huge part of, I stay pretty entwined in the recovery community. And it works for me, And
it's rewarding and reinforcing for your own recovery, right? And then, just personally, it's why I love when we have one of our own clients on this podcast, right? Because it's just really reinforcing for what we've been doing at Spectrum Rendering and Recovery Center and why we do it, right? It's not always easy, but it's really reinforcing, right? When for the hard times is to have these kind of reminders of what is possible, right? And you are just a great example of that. I know we're kind of at the end time of our typical kind of podcast time, but, I did, wonder if there's any kind of last thoughts that, you'd like to share. We talked at the beginning, finding connection in any way we can in this pandemic. So we welcome you for some virtual commitments, so that we'll share this podcast with folks in our programs now. But anything that you didn't say that you'd like to?
Just two things that were like paramount to like me this time coming around, right? And like, just like how I had to change my thinking, I think that like, if I look at everything as like a lesson or a blessing, right? It's either one of the two or sometimes it's both, right? That's been like helpful to me because it makes me be able to see the good in most situations regardless. And then like the only other thing that like has been pretty important to me was being able to like turn around the like I'd always think about something and then I'd feel it and then I'd act, right? I had to like switch that around, you know what I mean? To go on the other way, to like feel something, think about it, and then act, right? And like, that was like very important to me, right? It was instead of going from intellect, emotion, action to switching that back around, like reversing that, cause like when I made any decisions based off emotions, they were never good ever, and, now I could actually think about what I'm doing before I make a decision, So like them two things were very important to me, and I think higher power, that's it. I urge anybody that's out there that's struggling to like, to reach out to somebody and get the help, that you need, because, everybody deserves an opportunity at this. And, you don't have to live like that anymore. So, that's what I got.
Thank you so much, AJ. Thank you for taking the time to share your story of hope with us. I surely will be in touch to get you to do some virtual commitments. I know this podcast here, which you've already said, I know it's helped me. I'm going to go out there and speak for Lisa too. And I know it's helped her with the sayings and, and there's just so much here of hope. So thank you so much, AJ, for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem at all. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Lisa. Thanks, Jesse. And James, the quiet guy. Thank you.
We always thank James. Thanks, James. All right. See you next time, everybody. Thanks so much.